morning, welcome to Ipswich Hospital Trust headquarters here in Ipswich. Today is Black Friday.
It is,
isn't it? And that's frightening, isn't it? It used to be Good Friday, we used to do good things. It's black, I don't know whether that's for the folk being crushed and rushing to buy sales, and undoubtedly your hospital is ready to receive the mangled and mutilated as they get out of this.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Well, we hope.
There are all these dates around Christmas time, so there's another which is, I think, a week on Thursday, which is the last payday before Christmas, which is also a very busy time.
It is, well, for men particularly,
exactly.
because we all buy, well, most of us buy late, don't we?
Yeah.
I think we've got tea arriving. What a wonderful time. Tea and cake and water. Superb. Yeah. Right. This is young Nick Hume. I'm Mike Nimney from Felixstowe TV, and we're discussing a couple of topics today, if we may.
Yeah, of course.
One is within the Felixstowe Peninsula, and it's Felixstowe TV after all, but it has a wide reach. We want to know what the reorganisation since the Circle contract ended, and yourselves, West Suffolk and Norfolk, have put together a combination
That's right.
to run the primary care services.
The community hospital. Yeah.
Purely for 1 year.
Well, it's 1 year with an option to extend by an additional year, and the CCGs will make that decision, I think, March next year.
Right.
So the services that we will be running from Ipswich Hospital will be the 3 community hospitals in the east, which is Aldeburgh, Bluebird Lodge, and of course Felixstowe General.
Right.
So we'll be running those community hospitals. We will also be providing support to the specialist nursing team, so for example the COPD team.
Right.
And we'll also be running the communication centre, the contact centre for all community services across the borough, and that runs out of Ipswich as well. So,
so your reach is most of Suffolk, excluding Lowestoft and Yarmouth, is it?
yes, it would
it's
be.
It's a bit odd.
Yeah, it is, but it's always been that, hasn't it? Because
Yeah.
you've got the 3 CCGs, so most of it is obviously Suffolk is covered.
I think our viewer, CCGs are clinical commissioning groups, and they are the folks who took over from the primary care trust, and the geographical area and reach has changed. But we'll put something up on the website so you can see what is which with whom.
Yeah. So we will be running those services, as I say, primarily in the east of the county, and obviously for the town of Ipswich. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity. So we've already seen, by being able to provide additional clinical support and additional nursing support, particularly to some of the community hospitals, that we've been able to enhance some of the services that, for example, are provided out of Felixstowe General. So our senior nurse...
Now Felixstowe Community is got a capacity of 16 beds.
That's right.
So I'd like to talk to you a little later on how usage, where from, etc. Occupancy. Because I mean, one of the things that is becoming very clear, and it was very odd, yesterday after the board meeting that I attended here, I went into the library. And I was reading some hospital records of 1914 through to 1920.
Okay.
And would you believe they were then saying there in black and white that what the hospital needed was a sort of intermediary place that people could go to fully better recover, but they didn't need the hospital. And that's the same message that you've been saying for the same.
It is the same message. These things, it's also...
It doesn't go around, goes around, comes around.
There's nothing new in health, as I've always said. The only thing that's new in health, fantastically, is the science. Is the science and the knowledge. And when I think about my 35-year career in the health service, what we're able to do in terms of supporting patients at the beginning and the end of their lives, and with chronic conditions, and we're using less surgery now and more medicine, there's a whole range of different things that we do. It's fantastic.
Well, I mean, I just find it... I remember as a small child, folk in our village going off to Plymouth Hospital for an exploratory. And that was going to be surgery to find out what might be wrong. I mean, now with scanning and the rest of it, the surgeons actually know what is wrong. And often it can be treated without surgery.
And of course, even in my time working in the health service, when I started working in the health service, if you had a hernia, you were in hospital for 2 weeks.
Yes.
you're now in for 3 hours.
Exactly.
So I think that
Well, day
transformation.
surgery is.
But I think we are
But
still.
then expectation goes up.
Expectation
and
goes up,
the
rightly so.
equipment costs.
And
becomes
rightly so. But
massive.
I think how we use the community facilities, I think, is really, really crucial. So my ambition is very clear.
Right.
That people are only in the acute hospital, only in Ipswich Hospital, if there's a clinical reason for them to be there.
Right.
That they require clinical care 24 hours a day that isn't available either in their own homes with primary care and community care providing support, or in a nursing or a residential home, or indeed one of our community facilities that we now run.
Right, so if we look at the support in the community, what involvement do you have now with district nurses?
So the district nursing service is currently provided through the consortium by Norfolk,
Right.
and I say that is for the 1 year with a possible of extending that into 2.
Okay.
So that's the service that we've got at the moment.
So, if I could get my head around this, normally if you were to get sort of 3 organisations, they would form a joint venture company,
Yeah.
and the actual operation organisation may well have people seconded to it from one of the 3
Yes.
or all
Yeah.
of them, but that would be a separate, or have you set that up? And
So we've got something very similar to that. So the joint venture is between ourselves and West Suffolk,
yes,
and then we subcontract the business and we run the business through that joint venture board. To ourselves, we provide some of the care.
right,
To West Suffolk, to Norfolk Health and Community Trust, and to Mediquip, who provide the equipment across the county.
yes, because that was a difficulty that Serco had
Yeah.
when they took over. They got a lot of brickbats for that, didn't they?
Yeah, so I think, you know,
Wow.
it's early days, but I think
Yeah.
we're already seeing, in terms of patient feedback, some improvement, and I think our ambition is large. You know, I think we've got to commit to local people that they will only be in hospital if they clinically need to be there.
Right.
And clearly we have to work in close tandem with social services in there
Right.
as well. So social services increasingly are working in a much closer way with
And
us.
that's a whole different discussion.
It
isn't
is.
But we did go to the clinical commissioning group board meeting on Tuesday, it was
Mhm.
last Tuesday. I don't know whether it was a black, green or yellow Tuesday,
No,
but
no,
it was a
just-
Tuesday.
maybe just
and it was
a
held
Tuesday.
against Gray, and we went. And the question was asked by Roy Gray, and it's a very limited time frame you have to put questions, but it was how's the changeover gone, etc., etc., and they were broadly, the public should be aware of it. They were a little worried about the payroll going through, but that apparently went through with no hiccups.
Everybody got paid.
and
Everybody
that was
it's always
key.
my worry, but
Yeah.
everybody got paid, and then we got paid on time.
Okay, so if that's where we are, if I could just relay to you some questions from Roy Gray, who is the Deputy Chair of
Yeah.
the League of Friends in Felixstowe. What he wanted to know is the existing staff, and that would apply all across the piece, I think, what terms and conditions do they now have? Is it NHS?
Yes.
They are, so they
Yes.
transferred back.
So they've come back into the NHS family.
And that's no problem.
That's no problem.
Okay, so the people that were recruited, say, well, Circle were the administrator.
So they would
Where
still
do
have
they? Where do they sit?
So they would still have the terms and conditions that were agreed by that they were employed under, but they're now employed through an NHS contract under those terms.
So
and
it's a
conditions.
seamless transfer.
It completely seamless. I don't think the staff would notice the difference,
Right.
and more importantly to me, I don't think the patients would notice any difference.
Well, I think that was the wish of the CCG.
Indeed.
I mean, I still haven't rooted out why it's only a year and why there's then a year. I would have thought we need a long-term solution.
I think
to the whole thing.
there are ongoing discussions both in the east and the west of the county about whether or not there is something more substantial that we could do structurally in terms of creating a much more integrated
Well,
organisation.
integration is a word I've heard for
Integrated
the last
care
11
organisation.
years.
Yeah, and me probably
waiting
the
to
last
see- I'm
30, but-
waiting to see.
So I think I think that in a sense that 1 year contract with the option of extending for the second year is just to give all the organisations a bit of time to talk to the clinicians, to talk to patients about what should the longer term future be.
Right.
So that's the work. We're not just sitting around here.
No, I've noticed.
And, as you know, Michael, you know we've got a lot of ambition here,
Yes.
and we will be developing those plans with clinicians, with patients, to see whether or not we can reorganise our services even further to provide more care in people's homes, working with GPs, supporting GPs who have the lion's share of provision in healthcare.
They do.
People always think about hospitals as being the big building on the hill, but of course we pale into insignificance when you think about the amount of patient contacts that happen every day in primary care.
And
so our role is to support primary care.
And I think certainly within the peninsula we've been very aware that previous generations have been very generous and have provided a huge amount of healthcare within our town.
Yes.
Which most other towns probably have not been fortunate enough to have. And that's purely because of the geography. It would appear people like living by the sea.
Yes, it is.
Going back to I think it's the end of life.
Yeah, it struck me when I went to Felixstowe soon after we took over the services there, just walking around, the number of plaques on the wall that reflect that local generosity is extraordinary.
And they have been, whether future residents of Felixstowe will be as generous.
Yes.
We'll wait to see.
And of course, I used to be Chief Executive of Croydon Hospital, and I've discovered I'm now Chief Executive of Croydon Hospital again, albeit part of the Felixstowe.
Oh, of course you are.
So,
yes,
what goes about comes about.
Now, there's a bit of history. I mean, Mr. Croydon had a friend who fell quite ill, and during the journey from Felixstowe to Ipswich, he died. But if the intervention could have been done at Felixstowe at that time, he would have survived. And it was that motivation that caused the 10-bedroom cottage hospital, on which that site is, whatever. I mean, that's all for free. There's no charge for that. Now, the other question that Roy raised, and this is one that we've experienced, certainly it led to the MIU at Aldborough closing down, 8, 9, 10 years ago, I think, was the fact that they find it very difficult to recruit staff in Aldborough. It may well be because the availability of housing or the lack of it or the cost of it. But I understand under the Ender Circle there were a number of staff travelling within the group to support the Aldborough Community Hospital. How have you got any plan to address that problem?
So we're doing that. I mean, I think Aldborough is in a different situation than Felixstowe. For example, the transport links are not as robust to Aldborough as they are to Felixstowe, and obviously Felixstowe's proximity to Ipswich does mean that you can quite easily live in Ipswich and travel to Felixstowe within 20 minutes, rather than the probably 45 minutes an hour that it can take to get to Aldborough.
It's not a good route,
depending on the traffic. But so I think clearly the challenge to Aldborough is different in terms of staffing. I think though because Ipswich Hospital employs 3,500 staff, it does give us a lot more flexibility.
Right.
So for example, we are already offering kind of rotation jobs, or offering the opportunity for staff who are currently working in Felixstowe MIU to get some experience of working in an albeit busier and higher acuity hospital, the emergency department at Ipswich.
Well, that would be useful, wouldn't it?
And that would enhance their skills.
Indeed it would. Yeah.
Provide, and I think the feedback I've heard is they now feel part of a much bigger team of emergency nurses. We've got excellent training opportunities. We've got really good nurses. Paul Morris, who leads the nursing team down in ED, has I know, been out to Felixstowe, met with the staff and offered them opportunities to develop their careers.
Which is good.
Which I think is really good.
What we did have, and I recall this when we had 2 hospitals functioning, a lot of the staff that we had were nurses who'd returned to the profession, having raised a family. I don't want to sound derogatory of nursing, but they were of the old school perhaps. They had the skills, but they also had the compassion. And I think there is a broad a feel often that the technology is taking over the compassion in some cases.
So,
and it's a very difficult line.
So I've heard that
to be technically competent, and also to
so I've heard that argument a lot, Mike.
Yeah,
and actually I have to say it's not my experience.
No.
I spend a lot of time on the wards, as you know. I spend a lot of time with nursing staff. In fact, just this morning I've been with students down at UCS, and their commitment and their compassion and their passion for the job, almost universally, is what I experienced in the time that I spent, a lot of time with nurses in training in the 80s, and I don't think it's changed that much. I think there is the potential barrier for nursing, given that the academic bar has been raised.
Yeah.
But I think we're in discussions with UCS and with Health Education England to see whether or not there are different ways of entering the profession that don't require the academic attainments. I think if I thought that we were losing some of that compassion or some of that passion for the job, well, I think we'd very quickly address that. We're involved as a hospital in the selection of nurses. We're very clear that if we find that nurses, for whatever reason, are not delivering to our high standards, we won't let them get through. No. They won't be appointed. They won't even be qualified.
So really, it's sort of, in a big regard, a district hospital actually having a closer relationship with a community hospital and gives you, as an hospital board and West Suffolk, a wonderful opportunity,
I think it does,
to promote the whole remit, from nearly from birth to death and all the bits in between. But equally, it gives you the opportunity to tie into the university and actually have you could do a whole community bit, could you? That's right. We work very closely. So that could grow.
We work very, very closely with UCS down in Ipswich, and we've got some real ambition that we're developing about how do we support particularly local people who want to work in a hospital, because remember there are 400 different jobs you can do in a hospital. So everybody thinks nurses, doctors, therapists, and maybe a few suited managers about the place. They don't think about accountants necessarily, or podiatrists, or engineers, or building, or carpenters, or
you are a standalone community, aren't you? I mean, you even feed yourself.
We do.
Wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So what is the budget that you're actually running currently?
At the hospital?
Yes.
260 million.
So I could say that again, 260 million, which is $250 million.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, isn't it? So on a daily basis, you're nearly spending just under $1 million every day.
About £800,000 we're spending every day.
You see, I'm trying to get my head around the fact that the CCG, they said the current per head input that we have for our total health care across the whole community is, I think, £1,080 per head. You've got to spend that very wisely for it to be able to deliver the services.
And of course that's for the whole, that's mental health and dentistry and community health, and not primary care, but all aspects of provision.
It's a lot.
Beyond primary care needs to come out of that just over £1,000. And I think I take my responsibility for the stewardship of taxpayers' money very seriously. I've been a taxpayer all my life. I wouldn't want to think that anybody else is wasting my hard-earned tax money.
Absolutely not.
And I think I have a responsibility, as the board does, to make sure that we're getting best value for money. We don't always achieve it, but I think we're always striving to get the best out of the pounds that we get, out of the Suffolk pound. Having said that, I would never make a decision based on finance and ignore quality. Quality and safety and patient experience is at the heart of all the decisions that we make as a board and all the decisions that I personally make.
Right.
But money has to, we are stewards of your money.
Indeed,
and we take that seriously.
I mean, I've noticed, certainly from a point of view of decisions being more weighted towards clinical need coming out of the CCG. It seems to be much more a long-term view, an actual get hold of a particular area of medicine, be it heart attack, stroke, whatever, and there seems to be a designated follow-through and linkage, and that the foundations seem to be starting to be built. One would hope they survive long enough for them to actually be there, and we don't have yet another pointless reorganisation, but I don't know how you feel about that. I mean,
So
you've worked under Primary Care Trust, you've been working under CCGs for what, 2 years now?
Yep.
2 years.
No more than that.
Yeah.
Three and a half years.
I mean, is it starting to the integration
I think so.
a bit more?
I think that although we talk about reorganisations and we talk about different systems and processes, and I've been around long enough to be through most of them, and kind of what goes about comes about, doesn't it? So we go from region to more local, and then back to region, and more local, and I think much more important than that are the personal relationships that you build. And one of my real frustrations is that the average time for a chief executive of the NHS is 2.5 years.
Which is far too short.
So you just about establish the relationships, and then you move, or you're moved. And I think that the relationship that I enjoy, for example, Julian Herbert is the accountable officer at CCG. Julian and I have now been working together for nearly 3 years. We understand each other, we trust each other, we can have conversations that are honest and that are open. And it
does take a while to
develop those relationships. And the same with our social care partners. And I think the worry is, not, for me, less than systems changing and organisational change, it's that the people, because Julian and I could work together well, whatever the system or the constraints were that were created by the system. It's about the individual relationship. So I'm encouraging the longevity of people in jobs and support people in jobs. Perhaps be slightly more forgiving of times when times go wrong, because issues will happen. You can't look after 3,000 people every day as we do and manage a budget of $250 million without there being issues.
No,
we work in a risk business.
And there will always be, I mean, if it's a 99% performing well, the one can do a lot of damage.
Exactly.
But I was going to say, talking about relationships or whatever, we now have a return of a prodigal, don't we? Our new chairman, I understood, who took his first board meeting yesterday,
indeed.
Young David White, young I think is with respect to, is back.
Yes,
he was here some long time ago.
So we understand it.
So
Chief Executive of the Health Authority.
Yes. So he was about in the mix. I mean, he was certainly somebody that both Roy Gray and Peter Mellor know.
Yes.
And had quite a lot of work with. I joined it a little later after that, but I did know David in some respects. But that's an interesting change.
I think it's a.
So Anne's done her bit.
Anne's done her bit, and she's moved on.
About 3 years.
Nearly 4 years.
Did she?
So it's a 4-year job.
Right.
So David has been appointed, as you say, chaired his first board meeting yesterday. I think a fantastic contributor, we're a fantastic leader for the organisation. He brings a wealth of experience, not only in health, but
in local authority, and that's going to be very important.
I think as we talk more about system leadership and developing systems and integration, that experience of working with local authorities, understanding the different culture, the different politics, the different pressures that local authorities are under, and being able to work with our board and work externally with the CCG and with the local authority and with other key stakeholders in the community, I think is going to be invaluable.
Well, I think a concern is public health. The fact that that's been biffed and baffed about over the last decade or so. And it has the responsibility to a degree for bad health prevention. And that's a very key issue, isn't it? Smoking, drugs, drinking, obesity, all of those things. If we don't actually address those, then the task that falls to this particular establishment at end of life becomes, well, even during it, becomes much more severe.
It does.
So we really got to, somehow that needs to be pushed as well, doesn't it? It's we are all individually responsible for our own condition. And in the Air Force, if you were to be silly enough to go and get sunburned, that was deemed as self-inflicted injury and you were charged. So if you're damaging yourself, you're actually costing everybody else quite a bit. So, it's a bit like do not damage yourself.
Yes.
Might be not a bad crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges I think we have in the health service is that it's very difficult to get the political and therefore financial support for health prevention and health promotion.
And I find that a bit short-sighted.
Well, I think it is. I think it is. But I think that's the nature. We work on probably a 3-year political cycle. and yet the return of investment
Too
on public health or health promotion can be tens of years.
Decades. Yeah.
So, and it's a very, very difficult decision for commissioners and for the government to make. Do we invest in making sure that people who have painful and poorly functioning hips get their hip replacement within 18 weeks? Or do we invest in health promotion in schools to reduce obesity in young people and therefore the ticking time bomb that will become diabetes of the future? Now,
unless you make that a part of education as well as.
So I think the other thing that strikes me is that sadly one of the really big impacts in public health and changing public behaviour, people's behaviour, has been led by legislation. So the fact that we see less people, coming through I&E department following serious road traffic accidents is because of seatbelts and helmets.
Yes, it is.
And of course, the fact we've seen a 2.5% reduction in heart attack due to smoking is because we've made smoking basically illegal.
Massive. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think unless there is, for example, personally, it's an entirely personal view, I think we need to keep looking at and reviewing the decision around sugar tax, for example, because that may drive, people have to pay more for things. Then they may be less likely, they may go for the bottle of water rather than the bottle of something fizzy and sweet, because it'll be prohibitive in terms of cost. I think there's more we can do. In the hospital, we have 3,000 people who come through the hospital every day that have health on their mind.
Yes, they do.
So I don't think we capture
it's a captive audience, isn't it?
We've got 550 people.
GP surgeries and
GP, so I think all of us, I suppose my frustration is that we still see 1 in 2 smokers die. People have known for 40, 50 years that smoking kills you. As a reformed smoker myself, I know how addictive
sadly,
it is.
It is hugely addictive.
But supporting people.
Well, where I lived in Devon, near to Plymouth, we obviously had a big naval presence, and they used to have the wonderful blue liners, which were, I'm not sure whether they were the dregs off the tobacco floor to make the product, but at that time and at that age, we were being told that smoking was good for you because it calmed you down and whatever, and it was an appetite suppressant. And I mean,
improved your cough as well. I think
it was unbelievable. On reflection, and the knowledge was there. Anyway, we've gone a bit off the subject.
Yes.
What's happening immediately now? I raised with your board yesterday.
Yes.
This wonderful Felixstowe debate on that one there, which is actually what our community will be doing with the land that it has and the resources and the infrastructure it needs up until I think 2027, which is in the next 13 years. So this is long.
Yes.
And what I noticed in the whole document, there is nothing in there about the fact that they're looking to build in excess of 1,700 dwellings. Which is going to add sort of something like 3,000 plus 4,000 folk to our population. There's not a bit in there about what provisions will be needed to expand the community hospital or the GP surgeries, and I didn't quite know where health fits into local government, which is what this is. And they've changed now the funding system, whereby in the past, if you were going to be a developer building houses, it was assumed if education was going to be needed, sport would be needed, a various number of bottom line things, you were expected to make provision or contribution for what you're actually putting on top of it. So where do you sit from a point of view of, I mean, I know as a district hospital it's far away, but you've now got an interest in primary care. I mean, should we be looking at raising some money to be able to buy a 4-bed expansion to our community hospital?
So I think
go up to 20.
So I think that might be something that we look at. I think what we would normally do is the process that we go through is that once planning has been agreed and once there's the kind of green light to developing these services, there would be a discussion with the local commissioning group to assess whether or not there's sufficient health provision from primary health care, secondary health care for the local community. And I think And then, of course, that would form part of the commissioning intentions, recognising that demographic growth locally, and then we would have that conversation with the CCGs to say, based on what we see here, we need to see an increased provision in primary, secondary, community care. I think for me, though, it raises a really important point, because people talk a lot about the growing number of elderly people, and clearly as one gets older, one starts to think about the kind of health provision that I will want to enjoy being a
Well, I don't know about you, but I wake up and think, I'm lucky.
Yeah, I've got the best job in the world, so I certainly think I'm lucky on that. But I think so. But what we often forget, particularly with new housing, is actually we'll be squeezed at both ends of the life cycle. Yeah. So for the kind of, we talk about the fetal to fatal.
Yes.
So for young people, for families, for maternity services, for paediatric services, it's often forgotten in terms of planning, because we get a bit overtaken by the population's getting older. There's going to be more frail elderly people.
But we're having a rising population, so we're having more children.
Whilst that is true, absolutely. So we know there's housing expansion plans certainly around here in the north of Ipswich, and so we're keeping a close eye on them. So as we plan our strategy, and as a board, we look forward 5, 10, 15 years hence. Particularly as we look at the estate here, which, as you know, we've been looking at for the last couple of years in terms of the changes that we need to make. We won't be just thinking about the frail elderly, we'll also be thinking, have we got the right maternity provision? Have we got the right paediatric provision? We're now much better at understanding also the types of diseases. So rather than just saying, we will see elderly people, we can now be quite specific by location and by ward about what that will actually mean. How many people with COPD?
Yes, it does.
How many falls are we likely to see? How many people will be attending potentially our A&E department? And then we plan our response to that. We plan our services in response to that, all that information that we collect from a range of different sources.
Yeah.
So it won't be, health will not be forgotten in the consultation process.
I didn't. I mean, what I had seen previously under the sort of the 106 contribution looking to be made by the developer, it was sort of on a specific application that there was whatever. But this is an opportunity 13 years back from the land use being whatever, to put a marker down that in the event that does happen, we will be needing to look at this at this point. So who would be normally making that? Would it be public health?
So the local authority would involve the CCGs in that. Yes.
I wonder whether they had, because there's nothing in the document.
No,
and that's quite disappointing.
It's quite a high level document, isn't it? So I think that once you get into the detail about exactly the services, that the infrastructure, if you like, that needs to surround.
Well, I think that's what the community are worried about. You're going to bring in all these additional residents. But what about the services that are needed? Because this is already stretched, this is all stretched.
And I'm
very difficult to get a GP
your organisation would have raised that through the consultation process.
Well, we are continuing to do that, because this doesn't close until Monday, folks. So you've still got end of business is coming Monday to make a response. Okay, well, that really was the end of Felixstowe's specific bits. But you can see, looking forward, we're running into the winter. Now, what we did last year in this community, we actually were very fortunate that the A&E at the hospital stood up remarkably well. It was well planned, it was delivered. I think it only sort of hit into the red bits on a couple of bad sections. But compared to the rest of the nation, we did very, very well. What is ahead of us for 2015/16?
Okay.
I mean, it's crystal balling, I know, and undoubtedly you would have learnt from your experience last year.
We did
for this year. So what are we going to do differently?
So I think there are several focuses or foci technically that we're looking at.
So we will, I think, try to make this a separate segment. So we could perhaps call it. We'll just recap. Perhaps you'd like to share with us what the winter programme to deal with what last year did give us many more people who were much more ill
Yes.
than normal
Yes.
that came
Yeah.
to this site to.
So
to care
I think
for.
you make a really important point
Right.
there. So everybody assumes that A&E gets busier in the winter. Actually, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
So our busiest months are June, July, and August.
Yes.
In terms of the number of people coming through A&E.
Mm.
What we do see is a significant shift away from what we would call minors, so people with minor injuries and minor illnesses, into majors and more acutely unwell people who in the main would require more admissions to hospital. We learnt a lot from last year, as you very kindly said. We did do well,
Very well.
as regularly being in the top 10 hospitals out of over 150 in the country, in terms of delivering the promise to see patients within 4 hours. And although that might seem like a very small part of a very complex operation, you can only deliver 4 hours if everything else in the hospital and in the community and in social care works well. So for me, it's a barometer of how well a hospital is running and how well a system is running, rather than just what happens in the A&E department itself. So I think the major thing that we learned from last year, that's a slightly different emphasis and focus this year, is avoiding admission in the first place. So for example, let me give you one example. We've now created this year a frailty assessment base, the FAB unit as it's called, for older people who can be referred by the ambulance service, by primary care, by our own A&E staff, who will go and see a geriatrician and a multidisciplinary team of people whose ambition is to not admit that patient to hospital. So they'll liaise with community providers, they'll liaise with primary care, they'll see the patient to make a comprehensive assessment of need, rather than, I think, what we've done in the past is admit people into hospital in order to conduct that comprehensive assessment.
Yes, you have.
So that major focus away moved from avoiding admission in the first place, as well as concentrating on, if people are admitted and they need to be in hospital, we shorten their length of stay,
So
as short as is clinically appropriate and as short as we do it within those kind of safety boundaries, so that we're not discharging people too early.
So how is the access to the multidisciplinary team
So that's through primary,
arranged?
so it's through primary care, it's through A&E, it's through outpatients, it's through our community
But where do
services.
they exist, I mean?
So they're based here. They're based here in the hospital.
Right, so would they make out visits, or are you still coming in?
The patients will still come in, but we also have a crisis action team that works in the community,
Right.
which provides a very similar service, that patients can be referred to that crisis access team,
Right.
crisis action team I think it's called, and those patients will be seen in their own place of residence. They'll be seen in nursing and residential homes and in their own homes.
Right.
And a similar assessment will be provided, and a care plan put in place in conjunction with the GPs to keep patients at home. So that's the first end, if you like, of that continuum.
So you reduce demand if you can.
We reduce, probably the demand on the service will be the same.
Safe reduction.
The provision will be
Right.
different. So
Right.
we'll reduce, hopefully, and we're seeing some evidence of this already, the demand in terms of inpatient beds.
Right.
Once people are in hospital, we've had great success this year in terms of reducing those pathways, reducing the amount of time people are spending in hospital, with a much more proactive approach. So from day one that somebody comes into hospital, we're planning their discharge.
Yes.
We're working with families, we're working with communities, we're working with social care partners to reduce the amount of time people spend in hospital.
But I think it would be true to say that over time we've seen an increase in delayed transfer of care.
We have.
And with the risk currently that's being expressed about care homes, insolvency, ceasing to trade, that's not going to help your situation.
No, it is a worry.
And
You know,
we need a sort of a halfway house or something.
We do.
Somehow, if it could be conjured out and was relatively inexpensive per bed per day, because that's a killer.
Yes, it is. I mean, I think clearly the market is difficult in terms of nursing and residential homes. And I think we are seeing some private providers pull out and to exit that market, which is going to cause concern. I think I will be working with colleagues in the local authority to see whether or not there's more that we could do. Is there more that we could do in terms of supporting people in their own homes, so that there isn't a need for for that long-term residential nursing care provision. So I think how we use community hospitals for shorter reablement and for rehab.
Yeah.
And is there a different way of using the community hospital? So these conversations are ongoing. I think we've got good plans going into the winter. We don't know quite how cold the winter's going to be.
Well, it depends where it goes.
Depending on the newspaper you read, it's either going to be the
Oh,
warmest winter
terrible.
on record or the coldest winter on
Well,
record.
I've been told that Brussels sprouts are the biggest they've ever been because of the very mild climate we've had. So the kids will love that.
Okay.
Their Brussels sprouts are nearly a cabbage.
Right. Yeah.
Now, looking at the community, what I do note, certainly when we have a cold snap of weather, etc., if it's sort of whatever, an elderly folk, a neighbour, even a family member, if they start to become cold, and often if they're living by themselves, they don't even seem to be that aware of it. They seem to get colder, eat less well, and they go slowly down, and then we get a real cold snap. And it becomes not just something that you should whatever, and it really seems important that our elderly folk particularly, stay warm and eat.
So I think there are some really, so people who are at risk of becoming unwell, whether they're because they have a long-term chronic condition, or whether because they're more elderly and therefore more frail and more vulnerable to disease, I think we need to be much better as a community around identifying those patients at risk and then having a much earlier intervention. And it might be as simple as a phone
just knock on the door.
And I think, we've heard it for years, haven't we? Check on your elderly neighbours.
Absolutely, we need to be doing it.
It does worry me slightly when somebody younger in our village will knock on my door. I think
You're getting there.
It's the test, isn't it? That somebody just checks, have I got enough?
Well, it's actually when they stand up and offer you their seat on the underground,
yes,
you realise that either civility has returned to London, or you are looking older than you thought.
Having spent 30 years in London, I suspect it's the latter. But
right.
But there's a reason I moved to Suffolk. But
right.
so I think there is that challenge, I think, to all of us, which is to understand our local communities a bit better.
Yes.
And
the at risk, your at risk neighbour. And look, and
what support can we provide to people? Because
keep them warm, but take them an occasional meal.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're doing lunch for you and the wife and whatever, there's no reason at all why you couldn't cut out another meal and take it.
Exactly.
And it certainly helps and it makes their day as well. Well, Nick, I think we've covered quite a bit, a lot more to cover. The one thing that I did want to raise with you was, as you're aware, I've had a couple of strokes over the last year or so. And in the Health Governance Committee, I see you had a wonderful report on stroke service by Dr. Chowdhury.
yes, correct.
And that looked very positive.
It does.
It's already deemed to be a very well-performing service, but it looks as if they're looking to improve it even further.
We've seen some improvement in our stroke services. I think the partnership with West Suffolk is in the main working well.
Right.
Around the HASU services, I think what we do know about stroke is that the treatment of stroke very early on is changing. So there's new opportunities, new medicine available coming forward. I'm not the expert, so I can't draw.
No, I'm not asking you to treat me.
But I think that so we need to make sure that local people, have access to those new treatments as soon as they're available.
Yes. I mean, the real concern that I had was my first one. I didn't even realise I'd have one, and I think it's an education function, and that's true for heart attack and strokes and all those sort of things. Don't think it's just whatever. And my GP was very good, and it was actually very seamless and very professional.
Excellent.
Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
you
you
for giving us the opportunity, and hopefully you'll be able to tell us, perhaps midway through or at the end, how well it went.
Very happy to do that.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Bye-bye. So bye-bye from Ipswich Hospital at 10 to 11 on Black Friday.